What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. So today is an awesome day because of like a few things. One, remember, if you guys have ever seen in past videos, we have this wraparound deck, right? It goes all the way around the house and we've been working on it forever. Well, yesterday was a monumental day because we finally finished it. So this is the section that's over the garage and you couldn't even walk on it because it would just hang and it was a disaster. Now I can walk all the way around my house, and Carolyn is actually putting in some of the last screws into this deck. Yo. So we can go all the way around the house, complete 360. It is freaking sick. And the coolest thing about being over the garage is like I can actually stand here, I can see everything that's parked down here. Also, another reason today is awesome is it's your boy's birthday. So I was born on Star Wars Day, May 4th, and it's kind of cool. Kind of sucks, you know, COVID stuff, can't really go out too much, but today was the day a lot of restaurants actually opened in Florida. So we actually got to go to Moe's and sit down for lunch, which was really nice. It's the first time we've done that in probably 2 months. Carolyn got me this awesome gift. If you could see these 4-foot whip lights on the side-by-side. Now I have them hooked up right now, but I haven't like actually tucked the wiring yet, but they look freaking sweet, man. And you can see them flashing and it's in the middle of the day. I can only imagine how bright they are at night. Now lastly, the reason this is an awesome day is because the Rx7 is getting ready to go on the trailer and we're gonna go to Knight's Automotive, and we're a couple days from now, we're gonna get ready and we're gonna put the motor and transmission in. So what I'm doing today is I'm actually jacking up the front of the car. I'm raising the front suspension because it is super slammed. And with the 4.8 that's going in it, even with the F-body oil pan kit, it's so low the oil pan would hit the ground. And it's already low enough now that like when the weight goes in, it's just gonna be too much for the car to handle. Puppy. So what I'm gonna go ahead and do, I'm going to jack the front of the car up. I'm gonna adjust the suspension accordingly, probably raise it like maybe an inch and a half, and then that way when the motor gets put in it, you know, it'll squat, it'll still be low, but hopefully it'll give it good enough clearance that it doesn't hit the ground. So I'm gonna do that. I have the rest of the small little parts I need for the 4.8 that's going into it, so I really just needed like bell housing bolts to attach the motor, or to attach the motor and trans together, and that's about it. I mean, I need to go to the junkyard and pick up like a couple of ignition coils, but even when we get the motor and trans set in the car in place, it's not actually going to be ready to fire for probably another couple weeks because I still got to run the harness for the micro squirt. I got to put the battery relocation box in the rear and run the wiring for that. I got to run a couple switches, which I'm going to show you what I'm doing. I have all these old switches that I picked up from a Pet Boys that was going out of business. So like this like set of 3 pilot switches, I think I paid like $4 for, which is awesome because that's a perfect budget, you know, pickup. I have that for the regular switches. I have this, you know, I can either use this for the lights in the car, or this one. Either way, I paid like $3 or $4 each for these, but this one I'm for sure using, as well as this for my ignition. So originally I picked this up for the Fox body from last year's build, and I got it from that same Pet Boys and it was dirt cheap. I think I paid like $5 for this. So you toggle this switch on here. Oh, let me get it. This is your accessory power. You turn it on, it turns power on to everything, and then your start button, it just completes the circuit to your starter and allows the motor to start. And then you can kill the car just by flipping this down and everything's killed. So what I'll probably use this switch panel for is I will use this for my electric fan, this for my fuel pump, and most likely this last one will either be the transmission fan, like for the transmission oil cooler, or some other accessory, I'm not sure. So I'm really excited. I have like a lot of good budget parts here. The drive shaft is almost done, so I got the correct flange for it here. And I just need a Turbo 400 slip yoke for it. This is not a slip yoke. This is the one that bolts in, but as you can see here, it uses a different style U-joint. I've already swapped this tail housing, and I actually have the torque converter in it. But right now what I did is I actually put this spacer on here, and I should have put this on the motor first. So it's kind of like wedged on there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my heat gun, expand this, and pop it off. But for now, let's go ahead and jack the front of this car up. I'm going to adjust the coilovers, and I need to put on my other drag slick on the driver's side. The passenger side, we put on the... I went ahead and put on the Mustang slick that I had. I picked this set of wheels up for like 80 bucks or something. It came with the wheels and tires, and these are really cool, like old school rims. And this is no spacer or nothing. This is just how they fit. And I gotta say, it fits amazing. Like, it looks awesome. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the matching one on this side. And then what I'll do once we get it jacked up and adjusted, put it back on the ground, gonna go ahead and load it up on the trailer, bring it to Kyle's shop. And this video the next RX7 video will pick up probably in a couple days. I'll film it when we go up there and we're actually setting it down in the K-member and getting it fitted up. Other news, I did get this awesome aluminum radiator for the RX7. I picked this up for like 30 bucks, and it was a couple hours away, but it's the right radiator for it. It just bolts in right here. And then there's another bolt that it'll bolt in here. It's just sitting kind of low right now. And I have an electric fan that I think either came with the car, or maybe I had it left over from something else, but it's a cheap electric fan. I'll just wire it up, and then that way I have, you know, some sort of cooling. So yeah, let's go ahead and get this thing adjusted, and I gotta kill the power on the KRX before I kill the battery. All right, so I've already broken loose this bottom nut here. What you want to do on this coilover, this one's actually kind of nice. This up here is just the preload on the spring, but this down here, this jam nut is for the actual ride height. So if you see, the whole assembly is threaded through the tube that's bolted to the spindle. So you can just spin this entire assembly to change the ride height, which is actually really nice. I didn't think that these coilovers would have that option. So I actually had broken loose the preload jam nut previously, and I'm gonna retighten that here. I don't know what preload is set on it, but I'm assuming that I'm just gonna go out on a limb here and say the previous owner might have known what they were doing. So I'm gonna try and set it to the same height on either side. So I'm just gonna kind of use this like a link pin here as like an example, and just kind of gauge. I kind of want to raise it like an inch or so. So I think what I'm going to do is have it to where there's equal amount of thread showing above this nut and below it. So I'm going to, you know, raise it kind of like, you know, up to here. That much will be through the tube. So you can just spin the whole assembly, but since it's actually kind of still pretty tight, I'm just going to spin the bottom jam. Oh, no, I'm not going to do that because it is actually going to spin the whole thing. So WD-40 is your best friend in a situation like this. God only knows how long these have been on the car, and I just kind of want to not have to fight it too much. I'm gonna have to set this thing down somewhere, maybe like right here. You can kind of see as this gap opens up, that's this whole spindle and everything moving down as I'm threading this up. So it's kind of pushing the wheel down further away from the car, kind of giving me that ride height. So this was threaded up just a little bit. So I'm going to thread this down like one thread. So I've probably already raised the car roughly like 1/4 of an inch. All right, so I've raised it a good amount right now. So what I'm gonna show you here is from the bottom of this spindle, or I guess, you know, the collar, whatever you wanna call it, it's 1 3/4 of thread showing. Now I'm gonna show you on the other side where I haven't adjusted it yet and show you where it's sitting at now. And you can see the difference here. So now, you know, it's a lot more. It's about 2 1/4 inches. So I've raised the other side by 1/2 inch. I'm not sure if that 1/2 inch translates to directly 1/2 inch of ride height difference. You know, I would assume it would, but I'm not sure. Sometimes with the geometry and stuff, it might not equal, you know, the distance that you raised it up to the distance, you know, being higher. You know, maybe it's the same, maybe it's not, a little bit less, a little bit more, I'm not sure. So I'm gonna go ahead and raise this one by the same amount, put it at 1 3/4, and then put the wheels back on, lower the car, and see where it sits. I mean, before the wheel was literally sitting like right here. You know, there was like no wheel gap. It was actually maybe even tucked in a little bit, and you can see where it's rubbed, right? Because it's rubbed the paint off. And now, you know, since the metal's been exposed, it was, you know, there's some surface rust here. I'm just trying to pretty much anticipate the weight of the LS dropping the front end of the car. So I might even have to lower, I might even have to raise it more, because, you know, that 4.8, it's not light. I mean, it's an iron block, and then you got the turbo 400 behind it, which, you know, that thing's not light either. So it's definitely going to add, you know, it's going to put the weight back in the car. So we'll see where it sits now, but for now I need to do this even to get the car in the lift, because right now the arms won't even go underneath the car. The car is so low. So either way, I mean, I love cars that are slammed, but you need to be realistic, and this thing wasn't even going to be drivable the way it was. All right, so I got the wheels back on after raising it about, you know, 1/2 inch, and I think directly relating to like how much you lower it, that's how much of a gap it will give you. So if you adjust the coil over 1/2 inch, you raise the height 1/2 inch, and it makes sense. But yeah, I just wasn't 100% sure. I don't deal with coilovers all that often. Kind of a noob in that area. I'm a big proprietor of like static suspension. I like, you know, just shocks and struts and regular coil springs, but just not coilovers, just because normally I've been too poor my whole life to have coilovers. But I'm gonna set it on the ground for the first time and see how this bad boy looks. Should look pretty much the same as what I just showed you. Yeah, and it definitely is higher, because before I couldn't even get this jack underneath the K-member. I had to like lift the car up. But I mean, it obviously it is still pretty slammed, but now I can actually like stick a finger in here, as well as before you know, you could barely fit a piece of paper in between the tire and the fender. So I'm pretty happy with that. I think that raised it enough to actually get the arm underneath the car. And the car is really light, so we could just pick up on it a little bit, but it still will need to get raised, I think, a little bit more. You could see here how low. I mean, it's maybe like, actually, let's just go ahead and measure it. It's probably like less than 6 inches from the ground to this. Yeah, like 5 1/4 inches from this brace down, and 4 inches from the K-member down. So I mean, you get the motor in there and it's not really gonna friggin' have a lot of room between the oil pan and the ground. Not to mention, I mean, the oil pan, the F-body oil pan, it's a little bit more shallow than this, which is the regular truck pan, but not by much. So like from the deepest part of the pan to the motor, right, is like almost 9 inches. I think the F-body oil pan is like 6.5 or maybe 7. So you have to realize, like, wherever the bottom of the oil pan is going to be in the car, from there to the ground, it has to be at least 8 inches or more, right? I mean, you almost want to have at least 1 inch or 2 of clearance between the pan and the ground. I mean, you hit a big bump or something, or you hit something in the road or even on the track, it puts a freaking hole in your pan there goes your oil, there goes your motor if you're not quick enough to react. So it's definitely a pretty big process here with like getting the ride height right. I don't know what the car is going to weigh, and I don't know how it's going to react to the weight of the motor, but I can tell you it's not light. I mean, this thing is even like leaning a little bit on the stand, which is sketchy in itself. But I do have the F-body oil pan upstairs, and probably an episode between now and putting it in is just going to be me putting this thing the rest of the way together. So I do have to somewhat like JB weld in here. There's like a super fine crack in this cooling port, and I just don't want, I mean, when the motor's running, it gets operating temperature, the metal, if anything, is gonna expand, and I think that crack will become more open, and then as the pressure in the cooling system grows, it's gonna want to find any way out that it can. So if there's an opening for it to escape, it's gonna find it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get like a high temp JB weld that's like oil and coolant resistant, and just lather it in that area, because I don't want to even chance this thing leaking all over the place. But for that, you know, as for that, I have the flywheel here. The flywheel bolts are in here. I thought I was going to have to buy some, and I didn't, because these were already threaded in here. So that's kind of cool. Motor mounts are in that box. And like I said, I already got the torque converter on the transmission. Just need to go ahead and freaking slap it all together. That way, Thursday comes, we're gonna get this bad boy in the car, take some measurements. I got that C4 aluminum drive shaft I picked up for 20 bucks. And apparently the C4 aluminum drive shaft is supposed to be the proper length between the diff flange and the tail shaft housing of the transmission, without doing a lot of modifications or trimming it at all. If anything, I just hope I hope the drive shaft I have is longer than what I need. That way, you know, I can, advanced driveline can cut it, shorten it, balance it. It's a lot cheaper for them to just cut it, shorten it, balance it, than it is for them to extend it and add material. It's just, then it costs a little bit more money. And then, you know, keep in mind, or bear in mind, that this is a budget car, right? For those that didn't watch the last episodes, this is the inside of the car. I mean, it's pretty well gutted. No door panels. The window motors and window tracks, I'm probably going to pull that out. Have window nets on both sides. No windows. I do have the sunroof is in here, and I'd like to take that out and replace this with just like a really thin sheet metal panel, because this is some weight here I can get rid of. This rear glass is actually Lexan, so this thing's actually really light. We have a fuel cell in here, turnover valve, whole return style fuel system. So this is the supply down here going to an AEM 340 fuel pump up to the front, regulated, comes back here. This is the turnover valve and also the fuel tank vent. And I will probably put my battery here, since this is where it looks like where the factory battery goes. You correct me if I'm wrong. I don't know much about RX7s. Over here, this is a pretty big open area, so I will either do one of two things: put my nitrous kit here, or put my nitrous kit there, or maybe in the passenger seat area, and go from there. I'm not 100% sure. So I could put it right here in the back, like in where the back seat is, but I'd rather have it probably in the back, because I think since we have all this stuff, I need somewhat of a firewall between me and the fuel tank. So I think what I'm going to do, I still have some leftover sheet metal from last year's challenge. I will probably go ahead and put a small wall there between the two strut towers in the rear, and that way when everything is closed, right, I have a barrier between me and the fuel cell. I'm not 100% sure if I need that, but I'm pretty sure I do. I got to go over the rules again and check. But now we're done. The car is lowered back down. I just have to put this wheel on, and we can load it up and go to Kyle's. And I don't think Kyle's seen this in person yet, so I can only imagine the choice of words he's gonna have for this thing. Kevin, hey buddy, Kitty. So I actually kind of lost my GoPro, and I already brought the car to Kyle's, but I had no idea where I put it. I just now found it. So just gonna go ahead and keep going with this video here. I was planning on stopping, but I guess I'll just keep on trucking. So what I'm gonna do here, you guys already know this is the factory truck oil pan here, and in here I have the F-body oil pan kit from Speedway. It comes with the new windage tray, comes with a pickup tube, and obviously the new pan, and it comes with a gasket and all the bolts you need with a new dipstick, which is awesome. So I just have to pull this factory oil tube out, pull this windage tray off, swap everything out, and then I'm going to get everything bolted up and get this thing ready to go into the car. Once I get this on, I can put the crank pulley back on. I can pull the motor off the stand, and I can actually get the flex plate on as well, and then I can go ahead and put the motor and transmission together, and that'll be pretty monumental, because then, I mean, we're practically ready to throw it in the car. Once it gets in the car, I mean, there's going to be, you know, a whole nother series of things we have to do. I know I need to get these fittings here that go to the feed and return line for the feed and return lines that are already in the Rx7. So they have fittings that you can either push on, and they clip on, very similar to like a factory clip. But I've heard sometimes, you know, those little plastic clips and fail. So they have another one that slides over like this with threads on it, and then you can lock it into place. That way it can't come off. And those both give you an AN fitting, so you can attach a fuel line, like an aftermarket fuel line, with an AN fitting to it. So that's probably what I'll get. Those are generally like anywhere between like $7 to like $12 a piece. I need 2 of those. That should solve our fuel supply issues. And then I have the harness and the micro squirt over here in this area. And luckily the micro squirt, it came with the plug and play harness, so all I have to do is really just plug everything in. Got the the new windage tray and the new pickup tube bolted in. Now we just gotta put in the new oil pan gasket and the new oil pan itself. One thing I really like about Speedway too is they give you all the new hardware for it, which is really nice. That way, even if you don't have, say you get an oil pan that doesn't have any hardware, I mean this one did, but say you get a motor that doesn't even have an oil pan or any oil pan hardware, you get this kit, they give you everything you need to bolt it on. It's completely convenient. All right, we got the new oil pan on. There's the old one, out with the old truck pan, in with the new F-body pan. God, it looks nice. And I got the new dipstick on. They even give you a new bolt here, but since I already had one, I didn't use it. Here's the new one, good old GM parts here. But since I didn't need it, I'm just gonna save this for a rainy day. So yeah, I'm gonna wrap the video up here. I have to go pick up the nitrous kit for this Rx7, and I decided to do nitrous over turbo because of budget reasons, and since the nitrous kit was only $125 versus the turbo kit would probably, you know, even doing it cheap would be $400 or $500 at minimum. I could take some of that extra money and put it back into this motor, and in ways like this F-body oil pan kit, I couldn't afford this kit in the budget if I didn't sacrifice something. So in the end, I think I'll like the nitrous setup more because the car will be nicer. It's not as cool as a Turbo LS RX-7, but for the sake of the competition and the budget, this is what I went with, and I'm pretty happy I did it because I think it's gonna turn out pretty awesome. So the car is at Kyle's shop. In the coming days, we will be putting the motor and transmission in it, and I'm really excited to get that done because I feel like once that is in, which is it's probably the most monumental part of the build, everything from there, it goes a lot faster. The fuel lines and everything are already in the car. I just need those fittings like I talked about earlier. And then the micro squirt, really, I hook everything up. Once I do that, I get some relays. I have some switches and stuff that came with the car. I'm gonna go ahead and wire everything up, and then we're gonna see if we can't get this thing started the next week or two. So thanks a lot for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. If you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. I really appreciate all the views, all the likes, and all the positive feedback. See you guys next time. Peace.